Hello, everybody. How are you doing this evening, afternoon, morning? Take your time zone, apply appropriate time of day. It is Pseudo, and welcome to Top Draw episode 10, which we are calling the Powerfully Consistent Mage. Now, I must first off say thank you to everyone who showed up early. I threw a challenge to those who were here. And yes, for those of you who guessed that that particular deck was an aggro deck, it is an aggro deck. It's an aggro pally deck. It's an evil deck. And it is known as the Chua Sacrifice deck. And for those of you who did the mulligan, allow me to just point out it was the two center cards that you wanted to get rid of. That's your answer. I know I'm not supposed to give the answer ahead of time. I just felt like doing it because some of you guys had been incredibly awesome in guessing that. So, hello. Now, we have quite a few of you here, and I kind of like saying hello to everybody because, I like community. So, a big warm welcome to Gwen's. That's kind of an obvious, husbands show up. Hello, Harsey. Hello to Purse. Did I get it wrong when I pronounce it? It's not Jaeger, it's Baether? So is it Persh Baether? Am I getting that slightly right? Because you had made a comment and I wanted to make certain that I had said it correctly. Hello, Aussie. Hello, Flaming Ruby. Hello, Meluist. And hello, Michel. Hello, Osiflo, Taslo, Dist, and Signal Live Sun. And Uncaution. I love that. Uncaution. Don't be cautious, be uncautious. That's great. Viper, Zex, and Zedmond, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much for showing up, and hopefully more will join. If not, there's Ninichu. We get the lurking Ninichu. Yay. Okay, so basically what's going to happen is we are going to do what I normally do on this show, which is take a whole bunch of Chua, put them in a truck, which you'll understand when we get towards the end of the episode, send them off to the lovely group of you in order to properly sacrifice these digitally pixelated rodents in a manner that will summon forth through time, through space, myself from the past and Marsh from the past a little earlier today. Now, the reason why we do this is because Marsh lives in Australia. I live in the United Kingdom. The two are kind of on polar opposites of time zones, almost slightly. So we have to work a lot of time magic in order to make it possible for someone in my future to meet with me who's from the past, where I bring questions from the past in order to be answered in the future, which I can then use that to summon forth and bring someone forth to you now, in the here and now, which is incredibly odd. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to be here live the entire time because I have deck links to give to you and I have things to share with you. So I'll be doing so in the chat. But what we need to do is put on our black robes with blood-colored lettering and do a proper summoning for he who is known as Dr. Marshmellows. And yes, Dr. Marshmellows it is. And hopefully we can summon him from the harrowing marsh where he currently lives, the evil, twisted thing that he is. But he will be showing up in just a moment, thanks to the awesomeness of you all summoning. So, summoning Dr. Marsh. I probably should thrice name him or something, but yeah. Dr. Marsh and myself in the past. Can you hear me? And to the sounds of all the small dying Chuas that have been sacrificed in the name of summoning Dr. Marshmellows, I again welcome Dr. Marshmellows to the show.
Delicious, delicious Chua sacrifice. Greetings, mortals.
Yet another wonderful, really cold day where I actually have to leave the door open because the dogs are in and out. So for those of you who think there are ghosts, I don't have ghosts. I have dogs, which could very well, might as well be ghosts. But in your case, Dr. Marsh, have you had a good week?
Yeah, my week's been fine. Been busy like always, but it's been good.
Are you ready to tackle some questions from some of our viewers, considering how time tends to warp itself around you? Sometimes we have to bring questions from the previous week to you the week after.
I need Doctor Who to explain that sentence to me. All I know is I deliver messages from the future because of my time zone, and you deliver messages from the past, like some crazed archaeologist.
And yet at the same
This is-
time, I am able to, through the sacrifice of small rodents in the form of chuas, I am able to summon you from the future to the past, and from the past to the future.
Yes, we have officially broken the time-space continuum on this show.
I like that. I can get behind that. It adds a sort of weight and I was gonna say brevity, but it's not quite funny.
Not yet.
Not yet.
See how the night goes, Pseudo.
We'll see. But yes. Thank you so much for joining me again, Dr. Marshies. I like calling you Dr. Marsh. Do I have
Okay.
your permission, omnipotent one, to call you Dr. Marsh?
You may call me Dr. Marsh. It is okay. Although technically it's not true because I still don't have my PhD yet. But you may call me Dr. Marsh. It makes me sound important. I like it. My free upgrades to first class on planes. That's the entire reason why you get a doctorate.
Is to get free upgrades.
Yeah, that's it.
Interesting. One didn't realize that omnipotent beings needed doctorates, but we will go with it.
Omnipotent beings can't fly. God.
They can't? Why not?
They don't need to fly. They are everywhere, hence omnipotent.
You make a good point.
Indeed.
And that just makes me wonder why you want to fly in the first place. But me thinks that will probably be a discussion for another time.
We have discussed before that I am lazy. I want to use my powers for stuff like that. I want to sit on a plane and watch Princess Diaries for six times over 26 hours.
Princess Diaries?
Yeah, that's what happened on my last trip.
What the heck is Princess Diaries?
Movie.
Okay. I am
Yeah.
completely
Anyway.
unfamiliar with this movie.
It's a Disney movie.
That might be why I'm unfamiliar with it.
Targeted towards small children. Predominantly females.
And you got stuck with it.
Chose it over The Lion King, yeah.
I can understand choosing it over The Lion King. We're not going to get into debate about Disney movies, though.
No, not so much. That's more of a post show thing, isn't it?
Yes,
Anyway,
it is.
to card games.
To card games.
Now, this
yes.
is going to be one of those episodes, isn't it?
Notice that I'm not the one who took us there this time. I just asked you about flying, and you were all the Princess Diaries. I'm like, what the? Yeah. This time, it's the Dr. Marsh leading me astray.
Yes, this is what sleep deprivation does.
Yes.
We're all
However,
about that on this program.
it's how we're able to meet in our space-time folding continuum thing. It's the only way we can do it is through sleep deprivation on someone's side, and usually both of ours.
Yeah.
But, yes. So, we're back to talking about online TCGs. We're back to discussing lexicon terms. We are also starting to move into actually looking at deck reviews for decks that people have presented to us through challenges based on things that you have learned, etc. And as you saw pre-show, folks, there is a current challenge up, and that challenge is in specific to a deck that is known as the Chua Sacrifice. And the mulligan was up there, and I will reveal the answers to that after we let Marsh go back to whence
Fade
he
into the
came.
ethers.
Yes. Fade back into the Ethernet. Wow, that actually works
Yes.
there. That really works there. That's great. Okay, but yes. So, first things first. If you guys have questions, please be certain to include them, the Q colon, because that's going to make it a lot easier for me to capture questions for the future to respond to either after we let Marsh go back into the ether, or we can have them answered depending upon whether we can actually summon Marsh in another manner to have Marsh present. But I don't know. It's so confusing how time works for you and I, considering everything. It's mind-boggling. But we do have a question for you. Now, this comes from Katamari. Katamari asks, so, let's see. You talk about being able to trade cards with other players. And this comes back from a TCG that we discussed a while ago. But this seems very important to me. Have you learned any more about whether this is going to be a thing, such as being able to trade cards through Hearthstone? And if not, do you still think that it will kill? Do you still think that it can kill the community and replayability of the game? It seems that since they have the microtransactions to buy more decks, which Hearthstone has, and that you can break down the cards into mats, and maybe it's a money-based making decision, but being able to trade cards seems to be way more fun to me. Now, this is interesting because you and I got into a discussion about this yesterday, which is just going to confuse the time stream and time continuum even more. Even further. But we got into a discussion about this. So let's tackle this because this is multiple questions built into one. First off, is Hearthstone a trading card game?
No. Hearthstone isn't your traditional TCG. TCGs are quite hard to work over the internet. So, as most online card games go, they're what are called CCGs, which are collectible card games. Which means, while you don't get the opportunity to trade, but you do often get the opportunity to use your excess copies of cards in some way. In Hearthstone, it's your disenchant mechanic. In Jewels of Champions, you've got the sacrifice pit. Yes,
you must love that.
Sacrifice pit, and
you
I
must love that.
The percentages in that thing make my head hurt. Soulforge, you don't have any mechanic that I'm aware of, and it infuriates me because I have about 6 bazillion copies of certain cards I always get. Yeah, there's lots of mechanics that are out there for CCGs to get rid of those extra cards, but it all comes down to because trading doesn't work very well in an online environment because trading is very much about the very social aspect in real life. You talk to your other players, you negotiate with them and all that sort of stuff. Whereas if you look at some of the models that do have trading, take Scrolls or Magic the Gathering Online as an example, all the trading in both those games is primarily done through bots, either set up as shops or set up as pre-negotiating programs, which means they have set parameters in which they buy and sell a set amount of cards for ticks or cards for coins or vice versa. And so even though it seems as though having trading would be an extremely social aspect and community building aspect to a game, it in fact does the complete opposite. It removes that layer. It turns it into something that's just, I'm going to sit here and mess around with a bot for 20 minutes while I eventually find one that either gives me the price I want or one that doesn't, break on me. So it adds an extra layer of frustration to the playing of the card game as opposed to removing one.
Do you think it's possible to have trading in an online TCG that is handled well without bots? That could have bot prevention or,
I really don't. Because there's so much extra information when you're sitting at your computer. Sure, for stuff like Magic the Gathering Online, Magic the Gathering, the actual physical card game, you've got blackwater.com and all those sorts of sites that do give you a face value to cards, but that face value is negotiated from the players in real life, whereas online you're much more likely, much more likely to set a price and not negotiate it because you can see it right in front of you. That's the price. That's what they think it is. So this is the price I want for my card. You're not as likely to trade something for a lesser value, and vice versa. You're not likely to get something back in return that's worth more. So you might as well give it to a bot, which brings me back to my original point.
Okay, I can kind of see how that would work. I mean, I remember the days of sitting at my comic book shop, my local comic book shop, and going through binder after binder of Magic cards, looking to see what I was interested in, and, discussing with someone, hey, can you build a deck off of this, or what do you think of this card, or what have you. So, yeah, I can see that. When it comes to having the ones and the zeros, the digital bots can be an absolute pain in the rear end. Maybe that is why Hearthstone has specifically chosen not to do it.
So I think the model that Hearthstone has is very much a win-win situation for both the player and for Blizzard. Because no matter how you get your pack, so you can get your pack through gold, or through buying it, or through playing arena. But no matter how you get your pack, you're always going to get your minimum one card of rare or above, and your four other cards that can be rare or above. But at some point, you're going to have X amount of dust, and you can always trade your X amount of dust for the card you want. So this is a win-win for both the player and the company, because eventually you accumulate so much dust or so much gold to buy so much packs to get so much dust that you can get whatever card you want. So it nullifies the need to do trading.
Okay.
And it works well for Blizzard because you're either investing time into the game to get all this gold or packs or whatever, or you're paying money to get all this gold to get packs, to get your cards. And both the player and the company don't have to deal with annoying bots that sell stuff at a predetermined price and cut into Blizzard's profits and then cut into players' time.
Right.
So it's very much, it's good for both. Well, that's how I see it anyway.
Well, I can get behind that. I mean, when you start including bots in anything, it can be very disruptive to a community. But in this particular case, I firmly think that when it comes to the disenchantment process, we're gonna have to do an episode on that alone, because a lot of people don't understand how disenchantment works, and we'll have to look into effective disenchanting. It's kind of obvious when it comes to Hearthstone.
It's not so much effective disenchanting. Effective disenchanting is disenchant everything you have more than two of.
Yeah, because you can't have more than two of anything in your decks, period. And there are some that I think you can only have one. Yeah, it's the effective crafting. Thank you. It's a much better way to put it, Mr. Marsh. Dr. Marsh.
Yes, that's something for another episode, but I guarantee you we will do that. It's effective crafting, what cards you need to have.
Absolutely. Like, Tank Master over Spark.
Quiet you.
You'll understand what I mean soon. Okay. So, we've answered a question. If you've got questions for us, please send them in because we want to tackle them. But today we're moving into mages. We gave everybody a challenge last week to build us a mage deck. And we've gotten a couple mage decks. But what we want to do is, instead of just charging right into the mage decks, we actually want to discuss the deck itself and the mage and what makes the mage unique, special, or horrible, and actually present a couple of decks that fit with things that we have discussed, such as aggro, combo, etc. Now, before we begin, can you tell me what makes the mage special? Besides the fact that it's Jenna Proudmore.
Did you seriously just do that?
Well, I tried. I'm not exactly a male dwarf, but,
No, you're most definitely not. You can't be a female dwarf because you don't have hair on your face.
I could.
Quality work. Quality. Alright, so the mage. What makes the mage special?
Mm-hmm.
So the mage it's known for its effective AoE clearing direct damage. It's all about getting your blizzards, your flame strikes, your fireballs, and your pyroclasts. Those are basically the four cards that make mage. In all mage decks, you're pretty much going to see at least one set of these four cards somewhere. You're either going to see fireballs, flame strikes, blizzards, or pyroclasts, or all of them.
Or all of them.
They're amazing.
Or all of them. Well, that's the thing. They're so heavy, and if you wanted to have all of them, I think you'd want to play a control deck.
Yes.
Because otherwise you can't use them. You'll die.
It's very keyed towards control.
Yay! See, we're learning here, folks. Does that mean I get a gold star?
Oh yeah, I have to give out gold star. You do get a gold star for learning its control, but you lose a gold star for trying to do a male dwarf voice.
Oh, that is so unfair. Oh, fine.
No gold stars for you.
Ah, you are harsh. Harsh. Okay. So you expect to see things such as, the Pyroblast, which does 10 damage for 10 mana. And that can actually be impacted by other cards within the deck that boost spell power.
Yes. So Pyroblast is effectively 10 damage for 10 mana, which is okay in itself, let's be honest, because it's a lot of damage. But the fact that it can be boosted by spell power just makes it that little bit better.
And you can also make it cost less with the Sorcerer's Apprentice if it happens to still be alive.
Yeah. In the unlikely circumstance, yes, it can go below 10.
Yes. Now I have a question for you about mages, because they're one of the few classes in Hearthstone that has secrets.
Yes.
We have secrets. So, secrets tend to be what? Let's explain a secret.
My dirty little secret is I absolutely hate secrets.
Is that because they're not effective in the decks, or is it because you constantly get your omnipotent butt handed to you?
Oh no, I do not get my butt handed to me by secrets. If anything, people who play all secret decks, I laugh at them and then take the free points. So I don't like secrets because they're what's called reactive play. So to play a lot of secrets is to play reactively, which is not good in a very aggressively tuned card game such as Hearthstone. Hearthstone's all about playing your cards and attacking with them or dealing with your opponent's stuff. It's all about you make the action and make your opponent deal with what you just did. But secrets is, I'm going to play my card, you don't know what my card is, and you might trigger it, you might not, I'm not sure how this is going to go down, I'm going to flip my coin. I hate it. You don't know if they're going to trigger your secret, you don't know if your secret's going to be worth the mana you invested, you don't even know if your secret's going to be worth the card you invested into it. It's not good value. You're taking a big risk playing a secret at any point.
Is this
in most cases?
Or have you run across secrets, I should say, in later game, or is there secrets in meta? Or is it just
there's some very niche secrets to use. So
niche. Is that within the Mage, or is that in other decks?
So you see, there's hunters, paladins, and mages all have secrets. And you see secrets in all of those decks, but you see them either for very niche circumstances or against very popular meta decks as sort of a anti-meta card or an anti-deck card.
So sort of like Ice Barrier versus the old Hunter one-turn kill decks.
Yes. That's why you saw Ice Barrier got played a lot when Hunter OTK was around, because it effectively nullified their entire win phase at one point, and then they'd have to wait for another turn, and because you're Mage, you go, oh, Ice Block, Flame Strike your entire board away, bye-bye, I win. Ice Block, it got to a point where Ice Block was...
Ice Barrier or Ice Block?
Ice Block.
Okay.
When your hero takes fatal damage, prevent all damage, you become immune this turn. So it gave you a free turn when you were supposed to die. That's what Hunter OTK does. It kills you in one turn. So it stopped their one turn of going off and killing you.
Right. So the secrets, do you think, were probably put in as a response to the fact that the developers knew that there was a potential for one-turn kills? And that's why they're slowly getting rid of them? Or do you think they just...
I feel as though secrets were implemented as a callback to other more prolific TCGs. So as you see in most card games, you'll have either interrupts or some sort of spells that can be played in your opponent's turn to react to what your opponent just did.
Right.
And Hearthstone doesn't work like that, because Hearthstone works on a timed system where you get your turn and then your opponent gets their turn. That's it.
Yes.
So secrets secrets deal with that intermediary sort of time where your opponent has done something and you really want to be able to do something about it, but you can't because it's not your turn yet. That's sort of the void that secrets fill. Unfortunately, because you can only predict with a very limited probability what your opponent's going to do in any given turn, secrets become of a much lesser value because you can't always predict how valuable they're going to be.
Okay, so this basically takes us towards part of why we've named the episode the powerfully, and I am so brain dead, the powerfully consistent mage. That is what our deck is named. That is what our show is named. Wow. So what you're talking about is the level of power that a card has, correct?
Yes.
Or the worth of the card. So power level is something that we haven't really dug into as a term. So obvious this means I'm going to pick on you for it.
Yes, you do.
As I do.
Right. So power level comes in lots of different forms. The most common power sort of equation that you see is how much a creature costs versus how much attack and health they have. So disregarding any text that they have in the middle, something like Yeti. So Chillwind Yeti is considered a very powerful card simply because the stats that it gets, the attack and the toughness that it gets, is equal. The value of those two stats is equal or more than the amount you paid for it. So in this case, for attack,
I keep bringing it up. I'm just gonna go look for it really quick, just to show people where the Chillwind Yeti is. Ha! There it is. This is the Chillwind Yeti. Okay.
Yes. So Chillwind Yeti is considered a very powerful card in both constructed and limited, because at the end of the day, you're investing 4 mana to play something that is pretty much comparable with any other 4-drop. It either kills most 4-drops or it is more powerful than most 4-drops. I use the word most because there's exceptions, but as something that lots of people widely play and have access to, is a very powerful card. Now, you can look at other examples for power conversion, like a Sorcerer's Apprentice in our Mage deck, where it costs 2 mana and gets you a 3/2. In essence, that's anything above a 2/2 for 2 is okay already. Yes. So a 2/2 for 2 is about what you're looking at for vanilla.
Our vanilla bear.
Yeah, our vanilla drop bear. And for 2 mana, you get an extra attack and you get a special ability as well. So this makes this card above average. So it's a formula you can use for almost every sort of card game. It's how much of your resources are you investing and what are you getting at the end of it. And while the sort of conversion rates change based on every game, depending on all the cards that are available at any given point, you're generally looking for 1 point of investment. You want 1 attack and 1 defense, or 1 offense, 1 defense, whatever sort of conversion this game uses.
Right.
So in Hearthstone, if you were to give me a 5 mana 5/5, I'd say that's your average power point. A 5 mana card should be at about 5/5 with no text in the middle.
Okay.
And if we go back to looking at our Chillwind Yeti, that's the reason Chillwind Yeti is so good, because it's a 4/5 for 4. So it's slightly above that power curve.
So it's able to hit something and survive, basically.
Yes.
Which gives you another attack with it, or becomes a threat in its own right.
Yes.
Excellent. Does that get me a star?
Okay, you can have a star for that one. I'm a generous god. You may have a star.
A generous god. That you are. Right, so what we have just talked about was the power of cards. And there are some battle cries in Hearthstone that are more effective than others.
Yes.
This we can agree to.
Indeed.
But what I'm going to do is I'm going to move us into the discussion of what you see here, because you mentioned it, and there you go. What we are looking at here, my friends out there in the ether, is we are looking at the actual setup of a deck created by Marsh that is a Mage aggro deck. Now, to verify that this thing has a bit of an aggro lean to it, if I take this and I show you by scrolling, because I am apparently incapable of scrolling properly.
Scrolling, Pseudo, you want to scroll? It's the one in the middle.
Nah, I had to pull it out. If you look at that, your mana curve, as something we have discussed, is incredibly heavy loaded. It's a 6, 9, 6, 7. 1, 1 for 7 and 10. Now, when I see something like this, my first thought is, yeah, this is very much so aggro. But one of the things we did discuss was the fact that there is a difference between having a deck where the front-loaded mana curve is actually spells versus creatures. That can actually make a difference as to whether it becomes an aggro or a control deck.
We did discuss that, didn't we? Okay.
We did discuss that. We actually brought that up. See, I actually pay attention to you. Oh, omnipotent
that's
one.
Good. You get half a star for remembering something I didn't.
Woo! Getting closer to the zoo. Anyway. Yes, for those of you who are new to the show, we are collecting stars, gold stars for me. The audience has one, which you can see at the bottom that way. And my stars are over there. And once I get to 10, I'm going to go to the zoo. At least I have the ability to go to the zoo. But yes. So looking at this deck, there are not a lot of mage-specific cards in here. At least not in my opinion, there isn't. Yes, there are 2 mirror images. Yes, there is the Mana Worm. Yes, there is the Arcane Missiles, because you've got 2 of those. And then you've got down here the Fireball and the Pyroblast. Oh, sorry, Frostbolt's over there. It just doesn't seem like a heavy, heavy mage card usage deck.
It's not. It uses... It sort of amplifies the effects of mage cards. Simply, mages have very good removal. That's one of the key aspects that encompasses mage. Mage is known for having good direct damage spells, good removal spells, or efficient, I should say, as opposed to good. So Fireball is an efficient damage spell. Pyroblast is it's an okay damage spell. Frostbolt is an extremely efficient damage spell. Arcane Missiles, once again, extremely efficient damage spell. And your entire goal as an aggro deck is to get as much efficient damage as possible. That's why Mage synergizes very well with aggro, simply because you can use your spells, your Mage-specific cards, to either deal direct damage or to kill something very efficiently so you can attack for more damage, with the obvious exception of Mirror Image.
Yeah, Mirror Image, to me, that just seems to be one of those, oh dear, kind of cards.
What do you mean?
Because
it's the oblique button.
The oblique button. Yes, it seems to me to be one of those, oh dear, I need to do something to save my butt, and that seems to be what it is. And it seems to be a bit of a... I'm just glad it's not in totem decks.
You're glad it's not a shaman card, basically?
I am really glad it's not a shaman card, because I can think of ways of abusing that card if I could put it in a shaman deck. Now, if they ever allowed Two-Headed Giant in Hearthstone, which is where you have 2v2, and for those of you who have not seen it yet, do check out the quick bite where Marsh admits that he is a Two-Headed Giant. He's hysterical. But, you know, for Two-Headed Giant, I wonder how... Or I wonder if they're going to bring it out, really. I mean, their card's text sort of implies that's coming. But if it does, I'd love to play a Shaman Mage combo. Because to me, I think that would just be wrong on so many levels.
I don't think they could do it because it'd be incredibly meta-breaking because of what you just said. The card combos would just be insane. Anyway, back to the Mage deck. Because... it's about card combo. That's the reason why Mirror Image is in here, because it performs 2 very key functions. So it's your oblique button, because it gives you those taunters. It stops you from taking that extra couple of hits from your opponent's creatures.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, it's a very cheap way of getting both 2 creatures on the board and 2 damage when you have a Knife Juggler on board. It's great for that. It's a very unexpected combo. That having a Knife Juggler and then being able to play a Mirror Image, it's just 2 damage plus 2 dudes for 1 mana. It's crazy good. And then, you know, it's all the other synergies, like Sorcerer's Apprentice. It becomes a free card. So 2 0/2 taunters for free. I'm good with that. And then they can become bigger with Tinkmaster Overspark. They can become bigger with Shattered Sun Cleric. I can't disagree with making my dudes for free and then making them huge. I'm all for that.
You've heard it here first. Okay. So that's the aggro deck. And all these links will come into the channel, and they'll all be up underneath in the show about stuff on YouTube as well as on our website. Next is the control. Now, this is interesting to me because the mana curve, as I show people here, at least I attempt to, the mana curve for your control deck is also heavily front-loaded. Not as bad as the previous one, but it still is heavily front-loaded. Now, how is that just because of the choice you've made for the cards that you're playing?
Yeah, once again, it comes down to choice and how you achieve the end goal of your deck. Mm-hmm. The whole point of this deck is not to rush my opponent down, but rather to control the game state so much that it becomes impossible for my opponent to win.
So this is death by attrition?
Yes, it's very much death by attrition. So it makes sure it controls the early game by having enough low drops or enough low threats to be able to deal with any rush deck, and that comes in the form of Crazed Alchemist for your sort of extra little tricks, Mana Worm to make sure that they either deal with Mana Worm or they start taking a lot of damage, or they have to put bad trades into it, and Nat Pagal, because you always have to invest 2 cards, more or less, to kill Nat Pagal, or more than 4 damage.
Right. So basically what you have are, in this particular case, it's front-loaded because you're setting up actual threats that if they left alone could turn this into an aggro deck. If they don't deal with them, they will die. But at the same time, done in such a manner as to allow you to do the gigantic things towards the end, like the Ragnaros and the Karn Bloodhoof and things like that.
Yeah, it's all about getting the most value for your cards. At the end of the day, if every one of your cards gets a 2-for-1, only 2 things happen. Either your opponent runs out of cards, so they can no longer 2-for-1 any of your cards, so you win, or your opponent 2-for-1s every single one of your cards, and you still have half your deck left, and your opponent has no deck left.
Which, in the end, still gets you to win.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about, you know, using those super effective cards, those really, really effective cards, to make it so that your opponent has to make poor choices. You don't give them a choice. They have to make the bad choice to get rid of what you have on the board. That's what this deck is about. And then if they manage to make really good choices, then you've always got, you know, your Rag or your Pyroblast to just go, by the way, I win. Which is always the best feeling.
So what you do is you ensure that you have multiple methods for winning when you start to look past aggro.
Yes. So it's all about being able to... No matter what deck you play, the end goal is always to win. But it's about how you achieve it.
This is true.
Always sort of raving on. I'm always raving on about, you know, the deck's goals, which is... It's because it's something you always have to have in mind when building a deck. But the goal of this deck is to survive. That's the entire point of this deck. It's, I need to survive. How do I survive? That's what this deck does.
Okay. So I will survive. Right.
You are on the verge of losing another star. Be warned.
No.
Singing. No singing.
Right. Okay. So what we've basically figured out, based on the things that you were saying, is that you can have a control, you can have an aggro deck with the mage. What makes the mage powerful is the ability for it to do its literally board clears, and its removal system is what makes the mage special, as it has a whole bunch of built-in removals.
Yes.
Now, is there anything else besides that? I mean, is there you know how we were talking about there being sort of the trinity of control, combo, aggro, and how they can kind of all, one works with another, one counters another, that kind of thing. And that was sort of a balance. And we discussed how Blizzard doesn't quite have that in Hearthstone. You have pretty much your control and your aggro decks going up against each other. Combo, not so much, but, you know, you can try to make a combo work.
Yeah.
It does that work with the card setups and everything for the different classes, or are they all just even keel balanced?
Mage had a bit of a combo thing for a while, kind of. So it has Mage sort of has this gimmicky sort of freeze mechanic, which is, you know, it's got cards like Ice Lance and Frost Nova and all that sort of stuff. So back when Frost Nova used to, not Frost Nova, Cone of Cold used to cost 3 mana and used to be crazy good instead of just okay. You used to be able to, you know, freeze everything and just completely stall the board until you could play a bunch of spell power guys and Blizzard for 5, clear their board, and, you know, you just did crazy things because your opponent could just never attack you because all their stuff was always frozen. It was fantastic, and that's how they sort of work combo into it. It's, you know, freeze stuff. By the way, I win, but
Right.
it got so prolific that they sort of nerfed all the good cards for it.
Well, that is just a little bit too much in the metagame. Let us change it and instead make it bananas.
Yeah, it's a bit of tripe now. It's a lot of good fun because you can, even though you can't see your opponent, you can't talk with your opponent, but you know they're getting angry when you're freezing all their creatures and everything. So these days it's just a bit of good fun. It's not really competitive to use the frozen mechanics anymore until they bring out better cards for it. But yeah, that was sort of the Mage attempt at combo. It worked for a while, and then it got nerfed into the ground by Ghostcrawler's massive nerf hammer.
Who no longer, might I add, works for Blizzard.
I don't think he was even on the Hearthstone team. But
No,
still.
he wasn't. But I find that funny. Right, okay, so what we've now done is we've looked at an aggro, we've looked at a control, we've discussed a bit of how the mechanics work for the mage, and some of the gimmicks, what makes the mage the mage. Now, we asked people to send us decks. Yes, so we gave everyone a challenge last week to bring to us mage decks, and for us to not just look at, but to review, and to basically help you guys out with. Now, we had a deck sent in to us, and this particular deck is known as the Fire Mage. Pew pew fire! And in this particular deck, as you can see, there are 3 core fire spells. We have Fireball, Flame Strike, and Pyroblast. Now, you have been sent this deck from the past for you to review and for you to discuss. First off, looking at this deck, have they mastered making either an aggro or a control deck?
Trying not to be overly critical here, but I had to send a little tweet out to actually confirm what this deck was trying to do, because I didn't quite get if this deck was trying to be more on the combo side, more on the control side, or more on the sort of mid-game control or aggro mid-game side.
Okay.
It's a little bit of a confused deck at this point, because it's got those sort of aggro elements in putting in Worgen Infiltrator, but it doesn't have enough of those aggro elements to classify as an aggro deck. So it's got the Swamp Ooze and the Mana Worm and all that sort of stuff. The stuff you typically see in aggro deck, but it's only got 1 copy of each. It's not not trying to be aggro, but it's still got those aggro elements in it.
So it's sort of like what we were talking about with the control mage deck, what we were discussing before, where you had just enough threats at the early game to help you build to the large game.
Yes, but the reason it confused me is because these sort of aggro, the ones in it, the early cards in my control deck are more about getting those 2-for-1s, whereas and stalling the game out early, as opposed to this where the 1 and 2 drops are very much about, these are the cards I want to be aggro with. Like I want to actually attack in with a Mana Worm and a Worgen Infiltrator and an Acidic Swamp Ooze. I actually want to throw stuff. I want to throw them at my opponent's face. So they function very differently.
Okay. Is that going back towards sort of the card quality that we were discussing before then?
A little bit, where like stuff, especially Worgen Infiltrator. Worgen Infiltrator is a good indicator here of a card that's aggro. It's being designed specifically to be an aggressive card because it sits there. It only has 1 health, but you can't do anything to it till it gets its 2 damage off because it has the stuff. So it's for 1 mana, getting it effectively says deal 2 damage, then I die. That's the meta text on this card is I deal 2 damage for 1 mana. That's what Worgen Infiltrator
meta
says.
text? Is that sort of like a trans? Yes, it's the translation bait. Well, we've covered meta game. We haven't quite covered meta text. But meta text is where you take what is written on the card and apply it towards its more mechanical side of, or the more mechanical effect of it. Than just this is kind of cool.
It's taking what the card says and translating it into what the card actually does. Like, Blood Mage Thanos says, I stick around and give you spell power for a turn, then I die horribly and get your card. That's what he says. And Tinkmaster Overspark says, flip a coin, hope to get lucky.
I like this. This is the breakdown. What we may have to do someday is actually take all the battle cries and put them into metagame text.
Oh, jeez.
I've now made Marsh go, you lose a star. That's just more work for me.
That's a lot of work. But no, it's sort of the aggro cards in this deck are very much, it's not about stalling and it's not about being overly aggressive. It's sort of that mix in between. And because it's trying to do both, it's achieving neither.
Right. So this is the thing that I found myself doing a lot, and I still do it because I'm still learning. I am not a metagame player. I'm working my way towards becoming one. My goal with doing everything that I do with you, Dr. Marsh, is to work towards metagame. But for me, I find myself going, oh, but if I run into this situation, I need to take care of it this way. Oh, but if I run into this situation, I need to take care of it this way. And I start basically piling so many answers in that I don't give myself any answers.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
It's the point of saturation, isn't it? You put in so much stuff that it all effectively becomes useless because you've got so much stuff that you forget to think about other stuff.
Right. So this is why it's more beneficial to lean more towards either accepting that you're going to build an aggro deck where if you don't kill them off in X amount of turns, you die, unless you're really lucky. Or build a control deck where if you can't protect yourself at the start, you just have to accept the fact that you're going to be eaten by an aggro deck. Or, if you build certain combo decks, I guess, again, it really depends because Hearthstone's method of combo is
weird.
It's weird. Now, so basically in this particular case, what this is a multiple personality deck that makes it more difficult for the player to be successful.
Yes, so there's lots of ways to build a deck, but at the very core, at the beginner side of things, when you're a beginner, you need to pick a goal and pick your deck type and sort of hard focus on how you're achieving that deck type. It becomes a lot more advanced to start putting single cards in a deck. That's a much more advanced idea. Is knowing which cards you only need one of in a deck. So unless it's a legendary, if you think it's worth putting one of them in your deck, it better be worth putting 2 in your deck. Otherwise, you shouldn't have it in. At the very core, when you're beginning, if you think one of these cards is going to be good, you better be putting 2 in your deck. Otherwise, it's not good enough to be in there at this point.
And because of the 30 limitation, basically what's occurring is you're forcing yourself into one of the roles of either, say, an aggro or a combo, or aggro or a control. Okay, so when starting out, number one question to ask yourself, what is the goal of your deck? What is your desired win condition? Do you want to win by the big cards at the end? Do you want to start nibbling at the very start?
Yes. So the reason you do that is so you avoid, I don't want to call it a mistake, but it's sort of lost in translation, this deck. This deck is very much lost in translation because it's trying, as I said, it's trying to do so many things. Stuff like the Cult Master, you want it in aggro deck because you get to sacrifice all your really cheap stuff to draw cards. And you want it in a control deck because it draws you lots of cards for when you do those really good cards, those really good trades with your effective creatures in the middle. But because it does both, it's no good.
Really? So it doesn't. It basically right. So it doesn't give a benefit towards one deck or the other, which kind of makes it a dead in the water card.
Yes. So it's completely dead in the water at this point because you're either going to have all your aggro cards at the beginning and you want to keep going for aggro, so you don't want them dying, or it's going to come so late that you've got you've got your Archmage Antonidas out, you've got your Hogger out, and you don't want them to be dying. Like, it's got a couple of little synergies in there. Like, sure, Cult Master works well with Blood Mage, works well with Harvest Golem, works well with Hogger. But by the time you have that set up, you're either dead or already winning. There's no point to it.
Okay. See, that's interesting to me, that a card, and this is part of what makes, TCGs, CCGs, SCGs, whatever CG you want to look at, interesting, is the fact that you do have cards where the flavor text in meta terms can literally go either aggro or control or even combo in some cases because of the way it's written, but you have to decide what you want to use it for. So if you decide that this is going to be I will use it for something like, we'll say, the control side of things, then you want to make certain that you're building your deck towards that nature. So again, it just goes back to try to give yourself a fixed personality. So don't do the mistake I do, which is to try to solve all problems all at once. It's more a matter of pick the type of deck you want, really focus and hone in on it. Whatever cards you put in, make certain you check that if you're putting one in, you'd want to put two in.
Yes. And if you ever have that, that niggling question in your back of your mind going, is this worth one? Is this worth two? You've got two options, either two of them or none of them, or send me a Twitter, basically, and I'll see what I can do for you. But at the end of the day, if you're just starting out, it's two or nothing.
There you go. Sage advice from our Dr. Marsh. So in this particular case, to solve this particular deck's problem is just pick a focus and really nail it down.
Yes. So
it will make it less frustrating for the player, for one, and two, give you better win condition options.
So just figure out what you're trying to do and then build around that, as opposed to picking a bunch of really cool things and sort of building around that instead. So this tries to do a bunch of mini combos, whereas it probably would have been better to go, well, I want to be using Archmage Antonidas and my Pyroblast and all that sort of stuff, and they end up in the back end of my deck. So this deck will be control, and then if I want to have fun with all my really aggro stuff, I'll just make a second mage deck and make that aggro. So you're sort of fulfilling that need to be able to do both with those sorts of cards, but you're breaking it up so you have a better chance of winning with both decks instead of combining them all together.
Right. Okay. So basically, don't make the mistakes that I make, which is brilliant. Next. This was sent in to us. This is known as, I believe, the Murloc Mage. Right. And this deck is incomplete. This deck was sent to us with 29 cards instead of 30. So we're not exactly certain what's missing, so we're not going to put too much time or focus into this one. But I get a kick out of anything that has lots of Murlocs because Mizpah hates them. There has to be a brilliant Murloc deck out there. There just has to be.
There's some really good Murloc decks out there. Unfortunately, this isn't one of them. But there are some really good Murloc decks out there.
Well, this one
If you
isn't
wanna play
complete,
Murloc-
so we can't quite fully judge it. I mean, we don't know what card's missing. For all we know, a card could be put in here that might drastically change something. Although, I don't know. You would have better choice or better knowledge there.
But I think if you want to play Murloc, you have to play it as a Warlock. I don't think Warlock may be Paladin. If you want to stretch the envelope a lot, you can go Paladin Murloc. Mm-hmm. But I think Lock is about the only way right now, and the way the game currently sits, is the only way to play Murloc effectively. Because if you look at it, the deck itself really only utilizes 3 Mage cards, and that's Frostbolt, Frostnova, and Pyroblast. And if you were with Paladin, you might as well have had Blessing of Kings, some Divine Shield guys when they come into play, and some weapons, or something like that. Something that achieves your goal a little bit better than the Mage does. Mm-hmm. The Mage isn't very well focused towards sort of this combo-y, half combo, half aggro sort of deck, because
are Murlocs sort of a combo aggro setup?
Yeah, well, Murlocs are completely based around the idea of overwhelming your opponent, because one Murloc gives the other Murloc extra stuff, which gives the next Murloc extra stuff, which gives the next Murloc extra stuff, and so on and so forth.
Right.
And that's great, but you need to be able to do 2 things. You need to be able to draw all those Murlocs, which unfortunately this deck doesn't have. If you have your heart set on playing Mage Murloc, then you need to make sure you have that card draw in there. So
like Arcane Intellect.
Yes, Arcane Intellect is definitely a card you want to consider putting in a Mage Warlock deck. And it's the reason it functions so well as Warlock, because they already have the inbuilt card draw.
Right.
And the next thing you need as a Murloc deck is a way to stop all your Murlocs from dying. You need to either have a way of making sure they don't die, like Divine Shield, mm-hmm. or make it so that if they do die, it's not that big of a deal, because you're just going to draw all your cards and you're just going to draw more anyway.
Right.
So that's where the lock comes in. So that's the reason why those 2 classes work well. This one tries to do it with Frostnova, but unfortunately Frostnova doesn't stop your opponent playing Consecrate, or your opponent playing Holy Nova, or something like that. Something to just kill off your board anyway. So,
okay.
Murloc works. Murloc works in any deck, simply because Murlocs all have synergy with each other. So you can do funny stuff with them. It doesn't really matter what those extra couple of cards are some of the time, because Murlocs just have so much insane synergy with each other. But to make it better, you need to really think about what those extra cards that aren't Murlocs have to be.
Okay. So in this particular case, we've got 2 things that pop into my mind immediately. 1, they recognize putting 2 of multiple cards in. Yes. So they kind of got that part right. They've got synergy going for them. However, what is lacking is a way to protect that synergy.
Yes.
Okay.
So they've got the core of it is down. The core of it's good. So you've got all the Murlocs that you need, which is fine, but just consider tweaking some of your extra cards, like the Wisp. What does the Wisp do in this deck for you?
See, I was going to ask you about that. Wisp to me would seem like an interesting card, power level-wise, because it doesn't cost you anything, and you get a 1/1 creature on the board.
How do I say this without overstating it? Wisp is the worst card ever created ever. Please stop using it. Thank you. If I get sent another deck with Wisp in it, the audience is losing a gold star.
No. Don't take away their gold stars. They want to go to the zoo too.
No zoo for you. 1 year, no Wisp. No.
See, I would think that it would have a good card quality to it because of the fact that it is a 0/0 that can just basically pop in. Is that because you can only have 2?
I'm gonna use the saying, which I hate and I feel is an absolute cop out, but is completely deserved in this instance.
Okay.
Wisp is the exception that proves the rule. When it comes to card quality, like your mana to power and attack ratios. It costs 0, and it gives you a 1/1, but it's insert profanity here.
Insert profanity here.
Yes. It's just not a good card, because while it does cost 0, it still costs. It still has a cost. Its cost is a card. So it doesn't cost you any resources, but it costs you a card.
It costs you a card slot inside your actual deck. So that's something that I guess I didn't put 2 and 2 together for. When it comes to a card, if it takes place in your deck, or if you put it in your deck where you only have 30 actual cards that you can have, it could actually, literally, like you said, have a cost. And I did not think about that at all. Right, so Wisp is a horrible card because you cannot do anything effective with it.
Yeah, it costs a card, and therefore it's bad.
Okay, it actually has a detriment to it in the metagame text. Place this in deck if you wish to waste your deck space.
Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, this is... I just want to preface this by saying... because I have sort of ripped into this deck a little. I'm ripping into the actual cards, not into the person who sent us this deck, because it's a very common mistake for us to see. Is in Magic the Gathering, you see lots of people with like really sort of subpar sliver decks, because slivers are really cool.
Slivers are incredibly powerful.
Yeah, well, that's it. They have that sort of...
Slivers are kind of like the Murlocs, now that I think about it. Or I should say the Murlocs are kind of like the Slivers.
Like Murlocs.
Yeah.
Murloc, the design for Murloc has been blatantly ripped off from Slivers in Magic the Gathering. And it was obvious that we were going to see some Murloc decks somewhere down the line, because you always see Slivers decks somewhere down the line.
Yes.
And it's not a very original mistake to make. Everyone makes this mistake. I made this mistake. I had a sliver deck.
I screwed up my slivers. Just saying.
There you go. I traded so much of my collections for a sliver clean back in the day. And, it's a good deck to build. Murloc's a good deck to build, but you need to think about the stuff that goes around the Murlocs a little bit more.
Is that sort of along the lines of, being aware of all the things that we keep discussing? Like, ensuring that we understand the way that our cards are going to help us either gain or lose advantage.
Yes,
it's okay. So it's not just about the decks you want to think about and how they work together, the cards work together. But for me, looking at this particular deck, the one thing that occurs to me is, besides the fact that you don't have a way to protect these creatures, is that they are all so low, not just in their health but their attack, that there's nothing to save you if you actually end up putting cards to kill a Chillwind Yeti. You will lose anywhere from 2 to 3 cards, sometimes more, just to get rid of a Chillwind Yeti from somebody else.
Well, that's it. It's all about what Murlocs you draw in what order, and you need to use other cards that are around the Murlocs to help you mitigate that sort of random chance between what Murlocs you get and what Murlocs you don't get. So it's about what's called the intertextuality of cards. So you can't just think about your cards, but you have to think about all the cards around your cards as well as the metagame around that. So it's a very
intertextual. New term. Woo!
That we're going to need 2 shows to talk about intertextualization of cards, basically.
Really?
But yeah, and because it's a linguistics term as well, so it settles within my field of expertise as a linguist. But it's about all the things that not only are your cards, but the cards around your cards and the game around that as well. So it's a very big topic, but effectively...
Do we need Venn diagrams?
Yes, it will in fact need Venn diagrams.
Woohoo! That's my area of expertise! Sorted!
Your Murlocs sit in the middle, and intersecting with that are all the cards within your class that you can play with your Murlocs. intersecting with that is all the cards in all the other classes, including the class you're playing, that are there to screw over your Murloc deck. And it's about figuring out which ones help you best mitigate that. So it's a very hard thing to build a good Murloc deck, because on the surface it looks like a beginner sort of deck where you can, it doesn't matter what cards I throw with my Murlocs, it's going to be awesome because the Murlocs are awesome. But really, it's an extremely advanced deck to try and build. So you have balls for trying to build a deck like this, but
does that mean that the audience, just for having the balls to try it, actually gets a gold star?
All right, you may have a gold star for having the cojones to build this deck, to show this deck to me.
I'll get you guys to the zoo, I promise.
But no, it takes a lot of balls to try a deck like this and try to get it to work. And it's something that really good pro players still struggle with, is trying to sort of mix and match the synergy in this sort of deck.
Now, see, that's good news to hear. Because one of the worst things that anyone can hear is, this is a noob mistake. That's a painful thing to hear. But in this particular case, it's a new mistake every single one of us has made. And yet, this particular quote-unquote mistake, if done well, could be killer in metagame. And even the people in metagame have problems with it.
Yeah.
So what this is one of those pinnacle of moments if you really, really get it. Which is hard to do.
If you can build a good Murloc deck, chances are you can build a good control deck, and you can build a good aggro deck, because it requires you to have really good, solid understanding of both to make it work.
And that's what makes this an interesting sort of combo-ish deck, because of how they all work together.
Exactly.
Wow, so basically, the pinnacle of ultimateness is for us to build the ultimate viable Murloc deck and explain why it is viable.
And I will tell you this right now, it doesn't exist because of the way Hearthstone works. It doesn't exist, but you can give it, I want people to give it a damn good try.
Is that going to be our weekly challenge, or do we want to wait until we've discussed more terms?
Ooh, do we want to change our weekly challenge, Pseudo? I think after that discussion, it might be needed to change our weekly challenge. I'd like to see that weekly challenge.
Are you sure?
It's up to you, Pseudo.
Oh, I'm torn. Oh, screw it. Let's do it. It's Murlocs. I love Murlocs. Anything that frustrates Mizpah. Yes,
good. I'm on board if it frustrates Mizpah. We're gonna have to send this show to Mizpah. Make him watch in the morning. Make him watch our show. Just watch the cringe. Have like a little Skype camera square where it's just Mizpah facepalming over and over and over again in a GIF as we're talking about Murlocs.
I might be able to make that a possibility.
Oh, good lord.
But
if you make that a possibility, you get a gold star.
Ooh! I'm going to get to the zoo. So this particular show, I gained half a star after I had gained a star and lost a star. And the audience has gained a star. So we're getting closer and closer to go into the zoo, which is awesome. And yes, we are going to leave you with a weekly challenge. Now, as we had said, Murloc decks are viable, but very difficult to actually make viable. What I am going to state is we know that Locks, which is the Warlocks, can have a relatively good lock deck, or Murloc deck. We know this. Yep. However, what I'd like to see is people try it without using a Warlock.
Oh no, I think people should be able to use Warlock.
You think so?
But I'm going to throw out every Murloc Warlock deck that I see with 2 Soulfires and 2 Flame Imps and 2 Blood Imps, because that's boring. And I don't want to talk about it, to be honest, because because it's boring, and let's be honest, it's, oh my god, an aggro Warlock deck. Nah, it's been done. Surprise me. I want to be surprised and engaged.
Okay, so you now have been given cards that you can't use. Can they use, like, one? Or are they, like, completely banned from using those 4 cards?
Well, they can use some of them. I'm okay with them using some of them. I will never take away cards that people want to play because at the end of the day, it's their fun.
Yes, I agree.
How much I care about it doesn't matter a lick, not a lickety split. But if that's the deck that they want to send to me, I'm okay with that. But I can tell them right now the chances of it getting onto the next show are pretty slim.
So you want an awesome Murloc deck that challenges all kinds of things from all the different terminology that we've used that helps to make a Murloc deck successful.
I want people to send me a Murloc deck that I want to play. That's what I want. Send me the deck that I'm going to
Don't
get
put
to
wisps in it.
Probably not a good idea.
Not after the discussion we've just had about wisps. Yes. Okay. Well, there you go. We've got a Murloc deck for the Marsh. We're going to look for a Marsh block. I can't figure out a way to make it work. A Marsh
Lost
Murloc.
in Locky Marsh.
Murlocky Marsh. A Marshy Murlocky deck.
Yeah, something like that. Why not?
Something along those lines. Also, don't hesitate to send us other decks that you wish us to review as well, because next week, we're going to be talking about the Paladin.
Rah, my favorite class. So happy.
I should ask for a gold star, but it just doesn't work that way. Because at some point we get to the Paladin anyway. But yes, we're going to be discussing Paladins. So if you have particular Paladics that you want us to see or anything you want us to go through and discuss, by all means, please let us know. So, Dr. Marsh, it has been an honor, a privilege, and an enlightening experience again.
You bet it has.
Is there anything you wish to share with the mortals before we let your summoning fade?
No, I'm good this week. Goodbye, mortals, and please remember, stop putting wisps in your deck, or I will take my tamed chewers, and they will come and destroy your Christmas trees.
That's mean. That's awesome.
That is mean.
That is mean.
You're quite right.
I'm just kind of confused as to why you have... Well, now see, I'm just trying to figure out why you have alive chewers. Aren't chewers supposed to be dead?
To sacrifice.
Well, that's the thing. That's what we do. We sacrifice them for you.
They come in trucks.
They come in trucks.
They come in trucks. They're domesticated chewers that have had lobotomies. So they're still crazy, but not quite so crazy that they blow me up. And they come in big trucks in cages, and we throw them into my sacrifice pit. And I pop up anywhere in the world that I feel like. It's like having my own personal. It's like having my own personal trans mat.
Is that why you watch The Princess Diaries?
Sure, we'll go with that.
All right, excellent. And on that note, I send it back to my future self. Gosh, time is confusing when it comes to dealing with you. It's great. Yes, thank you, Dr. Marsh. Thank you.
That's all right. I'll see you next week.
And I'll see myself in a second. And I am back, and I didn't mute Zilla myself this time. Thank you so much for joining as we went in a little over time, mainly because we wanted to make certain we covered the decks that were presented to us. And also, when we realized, or at least I should say when I realized, how alike the Murlocs were to the Slivers, I'm like, oh my gosh, we have so got to include that. So that part kind of got put in and everything else that goes with it. But yes, so a big thank you to everyone who has showed up, even people who are not Hearthstone fans. I highly recommend, because of the fact that Hearthstone is currently in open beta, it doesn't cost you a dime to play it. Just like with most card games, though, if you want, you can invest real money into it. If you're not someone who's really heavy into it, don't do that, but you can get your hands on decks just by playing various parts of the game. So, for those of you who worry about server downtimes for MMOs, check out Hearthstone. For those of you who really enjoyed the meta gameplay, you know, there's tons of different card games out there. For now, we're focusing heavily on Hearthstone because the barrier to entry is so low compared to other games. And if you want to actually get into it, I recommend going back onto YouTube and start with our barrier to entry game, or video. We actually were doing Heroes of Might and Magic in that particular episode, but it explains an awful lot about why Barrier is so difficult to get into a card game and to do it in a manner where you don't feel like everyone looks at you like you're an idiot or a noob. So, on that note, I did specifically state that I had put the challenge up for the mulligan, and I already gave you the answer, so I'm not going to give you the answer again. Sorry about that. But what I am going to state is, please, if you have a Murloc deck that you believe is properly viable, doesn't have any wisps in it, that is something that can actually be achieved in game, please get that information to me. You can send it to me through Twitter. You can send it through MMOBuff's Twitter. You can just Twitter me. My Twitter is just below, pseudo_enigma. You can put it under below if you're on YouTube. Don't hesitate to do that as well. And then, of course, if you have any questions, you can always contact me, or you can contact Dr. Marshmellows on the actual website or on Twitter. And Dr. Marshmellows is at Dr._Marshmellows with an E, not an A. So it's not marshmallows, it's marshmellows. Malmol. But on that note, what I want to do again is thank all of you who have shown up. And of course, what is it that I normally say when I go to disappear? That's right. Doodle pip.